Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. You are listening to episode 163, and this one's going to be called This Is It, an interview with former NFL coach Evan Burk. Again, you're listening to episode 163, and this one's going to be called This Is It, an interview with former NFL coach Evan Burk. Guys, how are you? Welcome back to another edition of the Lovecast. I am your host, Jamal Javanji. It is a delight to be back on the show with you. I have I'm really excited about introducing this conversation. I had the opportunity to sit down with a fantastic human being by the name of Evan Burk, who has been a high-level coach in the football world, and basically he spent about 2 decades coaching elite athletes. He went from, and this is the crazy stat here I wanted to share with you, and you really want to tune into this episode, because Evan went from coaching 4th grade football, basically, as a volunteer, coaching 4th grade football, and in 6 years he moved up the ranks so quickly he was actually coaching in the NFL from 4th grade all the way through high school and college up to the NFL in 6 years. And that did not happen by accident. And he is a very, he'll share, I won't get into his story. He was a very unlikely candidate for this to happen to, but it did happen, and it happened for a reason. And he's coached at the highest levels, universities like SMU in Dallas, UCLA out here in Southern California, coached quarterbacks for them, and he went on to to work at the NFL organization called the Miami Dolphins. You may have heard of them, but he coached there as well with the NFL Miami Dolphins. So he's a spectacular human being, has a lot of great insights. I was excited to have him on the show. And Evan is now an executive coach. He's a speaker. He's also a podcaster. So he has graduated from the football world and is actually coaching at a much broader capacity now, but has a lot of insights from his time at coaching football at the highest levels. And I want to just warn you, okay, if you're listening to this podcast, I know, many of you may not be football fans. You may not be a student of the sport. That's totally okay. It's totally fine. As a matter of fact, I would say, even if you're not a football fan of any capacity, this episode really is for you. There are nuggets of gold that Evan has gleaned from his life and from his career as a coach at the highest levels that I see applying to literally all of life. And you don't want to miss this episode. So I invite you to tune in and to really hear what he's saying, because the way he got from 4th grade football, coaching 4th grade football, all the way to the NFL in 6 years has direct implications to everything we are doing today, both individually and also in our work and as a society. There are beautiful things we can glean from Evan's life. So he was gracious enough to come on the podcast and share his story with us, and I wanted to get that out there to you guys. Before we get into his story, I just have a few really important things to tell you about. You may have known, but I have a workshop. It's a 6-week workshop. It's super important. It's called the Sustainable Alignment Workshop. It is basically the entrance point into coaching work, the coaching work that I do. And I would invite you. We have a group of fantastic people who have been a part of the first season of that, so to speak, and we're wrapping it up, and we're going to be opening up registration for season 2 of the Sustainable Alignment Workshop very soon. So if you'll go to my website, it is jamaljavanji.com. It's the first thing that pops up there. I know it says right now that the registration is closed, but if you'll just click that button about learning more and watch a video, there'll be a video there that you can watch, and then there'll be another button that says, yes, I'm interested, tell me more. Click that button. It'll take you to a contact page on my website. Fill that out. Even if you're just remotely interested, fill that out, and somebody will get back in touch with you to get you some more information about that workshop. But I wanted to start telling you about it now because we're going to be opening up registration soon, okay? Second thing I want to tell you about, why you're on the website, since you're there already, okay, looking at the Sustainable Alignment Workshop. I want you to go to just scroll to the bottom. If you haven't already done this, scroll to the bottom of the page. There's a little place there where you can put your email address in there. I want to invite you to put your email address in there and click submit. That way you can get on my mailing list. There are things I shared there that I don't always share, anywhere else. And so I would love for you to stay in touch and to be a part of that mailing list. So if you could just put your email address there at the bottom of the page, click submit, I would love to have you on my mailing list. And the third thing I would ask you to do, okay, this is really important. Please go to iTunes, okay, and leave a review, either iTunes or we're now available, as I mentioned, on Spotify. It's kind of a new thing, but we are available on Spotify. If you go to either iTunes, first iTunes, the focus really is iTunes. But if you go to iTunes and leave a, rate and review this podcast, it really does make a difference. So rate and leave a review of your experience with this podcast as a listener. If the majority of people who would listen to this would do that, we would be set in the sense of it would really, really help the podcast get exposure and get out there. Okay, so if you would do that, if you haven't done that yet, just hit pause, go to iTunes. Takes you like literally 30 seconds to a minute to rate and review the podcast. That would be fantastic. Okay, without further ado, I want to introduce the stellar conversation I had with former NFL coach Evan Burk. Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. I'm super excited today. I get to sit across the proverbial podcasting table, if you want to call it that, with a legendary human being. As we talked about in the intro, Evan Burk is a former NFL, college football, high school, middle school football coach, has been through the ranks of the football coaching world, and is now into professional coaching at the business and life level. And I can't wait to get into this conversation. But Evan, just so humbled and privileged that you take the time to be on our podcast. Thank you.
Jamal, first of all, thank you for that awesome introduction. I would actually like to take you everywhere I go and do introductions like that. But I'm really excited to chat with you here today. So thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic. Well, this is history because I do not believe we've ever had a former NFL football coach, I don't know that I've ever had a football coach on the show before. So you're the first. So welcome. I'm curious, because everybody has a story, and but just for the listeners, would love to just hear a little bit about yourself. Like, where did you grow up? Did you know you wanted to get into coaching as a profession from early age? How did this all begin for you?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and I always was interested in sports. I was always involved in sports, not necessarily the greatest athlete of the Dallas area or of my family even, but I always just loved being around sports, collecting baseball cards, like being a huge fan of the local sports teams. And I think that love that a lot of young people have for sports just kind of continued to grow, was involved in every sport imaginable: soccer, baseball, basketball growing up. When I got into high school, I was a wrestler and a football player, and just always just loved the competition, the camaraderie, and obviously as well as the lessons that you learn through sport. And always had great admiration and respect for my sports coaches because on a certain level, they taught me everything that you need to know about life, right? Like specifically to, wrestling and football when I was older, just teaching you the basic lessons of discipline, of work ethic, of failing and getting up again and again. And I always just really loved that. And I think when I went to college, again, after growing up in Dallas, Texas, I went to University of Colorado to go to college. I was not recruited. I just went to be a student. And I think after a year or so, I kind of I was missing something. And I think what I missed was the camaraderie of being on a team, the energy that comes from competing for something. And I just missed being involved in sports. And so I was, I think 19, 20 years old. And I started working at the local YMCA, just doing coaching of local, fourth, fifth grade soccer, basketball teams. And eventually that led me to coaching fourth grade football, which was really kind of my first football coaching experience at the young age of 20 years old, while I was still a student at the University of Colorado.
Amazing. Okay. What position did you play in football in high school?
So I went to a small school here in Dallas, Texas, and I actually played quarterback and defensive tackle.
Wow.
Which for any of the football fans out there is a rare combination. But if you go to a very small school and you compete against other small schools, it's a doable endeavor, but definitely not a common combination that you find.
Okay. So then you go off to the University of Colorado. Is that right? The Buffaloes?
Yes, in Boulder. The Buffaloes, exactly.
The Buffaloes. So you go there, and did you know at that point that you wanted to get into athletic coaching, football, that kind of thing?
So how this started was I was at University of Colorado to go to business school. And I always kind of saw the world, I guess, through a business lens. But I think as I was in my second year of school, I started to kind of maybe rethink what I wanted after college. And this was kind of the first opportunity that I started thinking about I really enjoy this coaching thing I'm doing. And again, it was just youth sports coaching, right? So we're just talking fifth grade basketball. But sure. I kind of had this idea that hey, I'd like to kind of explore this and see what this looks like and maybe pursue this as a profession. And so it wasn't necessarily something that I had in my mind right at the start of my coaching career. But I think eventually I kind of had this idea of you know what, I think I want to explore coaching. And I think during this time, 20, 21 years old, I kind of had developed what I would term a North Star. That I wanted to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys or of the University of Texas, right? I had this idea that I wanted to be a high level football coach and a head coach at that. And I started really kind of seeing the sport of football through that lens, through my preparation of getting to this North Star. And I didn't know where to start. And, I think it's probably worth mentioning that one of the unique things about my coaching career, if you can't already tell, is that I don't have the typical path of a football coach. Most high level coaches either play college at a high level,
sure,
or they play professional football and they become coaches, or they have a dad that is already an established coach in high level college or in the professional ranks, or they have a dad that's an NFL executive. That is the typical path for 95% plus, probably 98% of the people out there that are coaches. And my path was obviously neither of those, right? I didn't play at a high level, and I didn't have a dad that was connected into any of these networks.
And I love that. I think that's so compelling to me.
Yes. Yeah. And to be quite honest with you, Jamal, I didn't know where to start. So I was well, where do I start? Looking back, if I could go back and just whisper in my ear, I would say, hey, just go volunteer at the University of Colorado football team. You're a student there. That would be very easy to do. They could even just have you opening mail as a way to get your foot in the door. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that was an option that was available to me. And so I literally started at the very bottom of football and said, okay, well, if I kind of want to pursue football coaching, I need to start somewhere. And getting a fourth grade tackle football team through the Boulder Rec Center was kind of this quote unquote bottom that I had identified that okay, I can get this. And so, as I mentioned, at 20, 21 years old, I was coaching a fourth grade tackle football team in Boulder. So it wasn't necessarily that it started out this way, but I think as I started to solidify what I wanted, it was kind of a reverse engineering of, okay, well, I can't be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys next year or maybe in 5 years. So where do I start? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to start at the very bottom and gradually work my way up. And that's how I kind of ended up in fourth grade football.
Totally. That's so fascinating to me. And the reason it's fascinating is because, first of all, it's such an quote unquote unlikely, right, journey. Like you said, you didn't have, didn't play sports at a high level in the sense of, D1 college or NFL, or have the, pedigree from your family in that sense. But what you did have is an intention, what you mentioned is a North Star, an intention to coach football at a high level. And that's what I love. I talk about, this is my work as a coach, working with people, the power of intention. And there's a principle here. And one of the principles is that an intention, when it's sourced from what I call a high level within at this really core and center of your being, when there's an intention at that level, their principle here is that the intention has infinite organizing power, meaning, because a lot of times our mind will go, well, how's this going to happen? Because we want, the logical, tell me. And again, I'm not against having goals and having a 5-year, 10-year plan that this is how we get here kind of a thing. But an intention really doesn't need that. When you set an intention, you put that out there, and then the intention itself has some, this kind of gets into quantum mechanics, but there's some energy in it that begins to open up doors. And of course, we obviously participate with that, move through those doors, walk through those doors, show up for those, those opportunities. But it is going out. It's like the intention goes out. It's kind of like, if we use a football analogy, right? Kind of like a blocker, right? So the blocker is going and it's knocking people all the way. And if you're the ball carrier, you're just following the blockers, truck and trailer, just kind of going in behind. And that's what the intention does. And I love that you set this intention to be this football coach at a high level. And it literally, I think we look back and go, oh my gosh, because what happened is, I think, historic and extraordinary, that you go from coaching fourth grade football to the NFL in 6 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
So talk about that for a moment. Like, how does that happen? Because that's totally unlikely to go from coaching football at fourth grade level to the NFL, highest level you can go in 6 years.
Yeah. And I love a lot of what you just said. First of all, The Power of Intention is a book also by Wayne Dyer that I read early on in my coaching career. And
wow,
it's interesting. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, wow, that's phenomenal, because I don't see those worlds connecting very much, or at least in my, Wayne Dyer and talking about The Power of Intention in the actual football coaching world. I love that these two were connected for you.
Most of the coaches are reading books about Bobby Knight and
right.
Of Woody Hayes and
totally.
Old school coaches. I read those books as well, but I'm not a typical football coach. I was definitely, exploring, I guess, more of like a spiritual enrichment and development in my own journey, as well as my own professional development. And I think that those are key to kind of have aligned with each other or working in parallel with each other. And something that you mentioned that, I at 20 years old, I definitely was not mature enough to understand what I was doing, right? Sure. Like, I think I look back, as you mentioned, and it's like, well, of course you were able to do this because you set this intention and you followed through and you had a plan of action, et cetera, et cetera. But literally, I love what you just said, where it's more about the intention than it is goal setting, because I love how you phrase that as well, because I've had a maybe contrarian point of view for a long period of time that I think goals are actually detrimental. Now, I believe fully. Yeah.
Interesting.
So I believe fully. Yeah, no. And I'm happy to chat about this or have a discussion around it. But I think that the vision, the North Star, is more important. Now, you can set up for yourself small goals, small wins, and create a path. But none of that really matters, because ultimately, whether we're talking about sports or life, even the best laid plans, the best intentions, you're going to be dealing with adversity, and adaptability is going to be one of the key pieces towards you ultimately experiencing success. And you mentioned the blockers on the play. Well, every play, when I drew it up on a whiteboard, was a touchdown, right? There are no plays that you run. It's oh, this is going to get us 3 yards. It's going to be awesome. You never operate like that in coaching. Every time you drop a play on the whiteboard, it's a touchdown. And obviously not every play is going to be a touchdown. Sure. Sometimes you're going to make a mistake. Sometimes you're going to drop the snap. Sometimes like somebody's going to tackle you after 5 yards, or maybe the blocker misses like the one guy that would have like allowed you to score a touchdown. But what do? You get back up, you get in the huddle, you call the next play, and you get back up and you run the next play. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think in like many, getting back to like your question and like my path, looking back at it, you think, oh, well, it was like fourth grade football to JV high school to, ops assistant in college to coaching on the field in college to the NFL. That's a very like easy path to visualize and very linear. But I think like in the moment, what was key is that like I got that fourth grade football quote unquote job. Obviously, it was just like a volunteer opportunity, but I treated that opportunity like the future depended on it. And I feel like in a lot of ways it did. And
it did. I mean, if you really think about it, people see, this is where it's so compelling to me, because people in life, they get this, they look at maybe their current position because they have a North Star, right? There's somewhere they want to go. And they have this idea of like, well, when I get there, when I get this dream job, or when I do this thing, then I'll put my all into it. But until then, I'm just kind of waiting. I'm biding my time. I'm just kind of waiting. But that's not how it works. Like for you, like this fourth grade, what somebody would say, oh, it's just a volunteer thing. It's just low level. For you, it's like, this is my whole life. This is my career. This moment, working this position, which I think if you do that with anything, it thrives. It's like you're bringing a level of consciousness and attention to something. It's like a plant, right? If you give it light and water and attention, it will grow. And that's literally what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of people will say, well, it's just fourth grade football. But like, how do you get to the next, I was just mentioning, if you look at my path to the NFL, it's like a very linear path up the mountain, so to speak. Right. Like I'm advancing every year. I'm going to the next level, or I'm getting promoted. But like in a certain sense, those all happened because of the way I treated where I was. And I often saw in my career where people would say, well, like I'm here, I'm doing this. I should really be doing that job. And I'm not going to like put everything I have into this role because I really should be there. And like, that's when I'm going to really like turn it on. And like you see this also, by the way, in like recruiting, and it could be recruiting for a corporate company or recruiting for a football team. Like there's a lot of players that are very talented that don't have that type of mentality. Like they have that mentality of like, I've always been talented. I've always been the best on whatever team I'm on. And I just show up and I'm great. And those are obviously the super talented people that never ultimately realize success at the highest levels because they always think that they're going to be great, or I've always been the best in whatever field or arena I've been in. Whereas like if you take another approach of, okay, I can't do anything Cowboys. Like the only thing I can do right now is focus on being the absolute best fourth grade football coach I can be. The best junior varsity high school coach I can be. And literally the path is not laid out in front of me yet. Like the only thing that matters is the here and the now. So the next step will not be determined until you put everything you have into where you are. So like the path, fourth grade football to the NFL in 6 years was literally done as the way I phrased it in my head with a dominate today mentality. Every day when I woke up, I had this mentality of I'm either just getting by or I'm dominating. So I literally gave myself only 2 options. And like this resulted in me being like a super intense person to work with. This led to me running up and down the halls to grab something as simple as like a printout from the printer at the end of the hallway. And maybe people looked at me a little sideways, but guess what? They were already looking at me sideways because I'm 5'10", 160 pounds, soaking wet. I'm not intimidating. I'm not a former player. I'm already different. right? And so like I almost kind of leaned into like my dominate today mentality. And not everybody's going to vibe with that, and that's fine. But that's what I needed to do to reach my highest level in that moment so that I could prepare myself to whatever was next. And I never said to myself, okay, I have to do this to be this next year. It was always like, okay, I'm here. Like, I can't do anything about next year. I can't do anything about this year other than show up today and be great and dominate in this moment. And I think we see this a lot. And I could go on and on and on, but right now the NBA playoffs are going on. It's the end of May. My favorite team, the Dallas Mavericks, currently are down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors in their best of 4 or best of 7 playoff series, first of 4, and they were down 3-0. And everybody's like, well, can they come back? Like, no team has ever done it. No team's ever come back from being down 0-3. And the bottom line is like, you can't do anything about games 5, 6, and 7. Like, you have to win game 4. And once you win game 4, that will give you an opportunity to play game 5. So like, obviously ESPN and everybody else wants to have these narratives of like, oh, well, no team has ever done this. And like the only way you can do that is literally not by focusing on, okay, well, we have to win 4 in a row. Cause like, that's ultimately not what you have to do. What you have to do is you have to win today. And like to equate it to a lot of people out there. And like specifically, we went through this in football. It's like, you can't win a championship today. All you can do is show up and have a great Thursday practice. Now, that Thursday practice will in part determine what the result is in the next game, which will ultimately 100%. In part determine what the result is at the end of the season. But like, you can't do anything about that. And like the best teams I've been on have never been the ones that are like, guys, we're here to win a championship. The best teams I've been on and the best teams I've opposed and studied are the teams that are always like, guys, like nothing else in this world matters but the game this week and specifically the practice we have today. And I think that unrelenting focus and desire to be great in the moment is really what separates people. And kind of, to answer your question in a very long-winded way is how I was able to go from 4th grade football to the NFL in such a short period of time. You're speaking gold here. This is like beautiful. And it is life. It's what I wish I would really want people to hear what you're saying here, because this literally is life. Like I always tell people, there's no future. It doesn't exist. It's in your imagination, but literally this is all you have in this moment. So like you're coaching 4th grade. This is it. It's the whole world. So how you want to approach it? Are you going to be all in or not? And that's the thing. And I love that win today. I've actually heard some folks, as I mentioned, I'm a huge Buckeye fan because I grew up in Columbus and, but I heard their quarterback recently talking about, he said, your goal when you're on the field is to get a first down. It's not a touchdown. It's a first down. Obviously the North Star is touchdown and win the game, but we're trying to get a first down. So where's the marker? So that's really what we're here to do. Get the first down and every play. So I love that. And that's kind of what you're talking about here. And when it comes to looking for the next thing or trying to get to the future, I always tell people like that will always take care of itself. It literally always unfolds. Like you don't have to set a goal. Like if you woke up in the morning and you're watching a beautiful sunrise, you don't have to set a goal for the sun to set. Like you don't have to set that goal. Now you can say, hey, I have an intention to watch it, but it's going to happen. The sun is going to set no matter what you do, the future will unfold in real time. But if you show up, if your quote unquote goal, if you want to use that word, is to show up and to be fully present and dialed into whatever the thing that is that you're doing, then you will witness that sunset and enjoy it. And it'll be fantastic. Because you're fully dialed in. You don't have to make it happen. You just show up. And life is that way, right? We show up for whatever we're doing. The North Star will manifest for you because you're showing up, which literally is what happened in your life. And I love that. So I'm curious if we could talk just a little bit about this, because I actually had a podcast episode about why goals are futile. And so I've not heard many people mention this, but especially from a football coaching world where it's all about setting goals. And my wife is an educator. She's a teacher.
And so we had this conversation on the show, and she mentioned that my whole job, everything I do is about goal setting. So we kind of talked about, how to navigate that a little bit, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this perspective as a coach. Like, why are goals futile, or why are they detrimental? I think is the word you use.
Well, I think, if there was a devil's advocate on this call, they would say, well, if your goal is to be intentional and be in the moment, isn't that a goal? Yeah, okay, you can make that argument. I guess maybe a better way to say it is that I am process driven and not results oriented. And I think a lot of times when we talk about goals equate to some type of result we're trying to get.
And result future, right?
Yes.
But you're talking about process.
I'm talking about process. So like everything that I do is reverse engineered into a process and really focused on the behaviors and actions that will lead to success or the results that we want. But yet nothing that I do is based in results. Now, like you could make you an argument like, okay, well, if you're trying to make X amount of sales in a month, you know that you have to make Y number of calls. And like, okay, well, if you've reverse engineered that, then that's fine. I would also make the argument that that's a very like process driven approach. Like the process is you have to make this many calls, but like regardless is like you need to break down like the actions and behaviors that are going to lead to your ultimate success. Right. And like, I just have seen, I think that like results oftentimes are detrimental too, because, I get asked sometimes on podcasts where it's like, well, how do you define success? To like a question to me.
Sure.
And to me, like success is not derived in like winning or the amount of points you win by, or maybe like the number of how close you were, how many points you lose by. It is in the effort. For the football fans out there, Walter Payton, who is one of the all-time great running backs, was a running back for the Chicago Bears for a long period of time. They asked him when he was preparing for the Super Bowl, like, what are your intentions? What are your goals for the Super Bowl? And most people say to win the Super Bowl, to be the MVP, to score a touchdown. His response was, I want to play the game. And at the end of the game, I want to be so exhausted that I can't walk off the field. Wow. Right now, probably slightly unrealistic. Like you're not going to play a game to literal death, but I love the imagery of like, I'm not trying to score a touchdown. I am not trying to win. I'm trying to play the game at my absolute best, at my absolute highest level. And like, if I do that, then I will have known that I've given everything I possibly have towards the effort of winning. And I think like that's a common thing that you see is like this constant pursuit of ongoing development and improvement, and like this all out effort to be great in the moment. And I just like really think that when we're talking about goals, sometimes they can be detrimental. And like, I used to have a coach that I really admired, and he used to ask our team, like, what's the score here? Watching film with the team, like, what's the score here? The score doesn't matter. Like we're not concerned with the score. We're concerned with playing at our highest level.
Love it.
And I think that's the way that I really look at things, is like, I'm trying to compete at my highest level today. What is my absolute best today? Oh, I'm sick. Okay, well, that's fine. But I still have a best. I still have an absolute best that I'm trying to reach. I've prepared tirelessly for this moment for the last 3 months, and I feel in like peak optimal physical, mental, emotional state right now. Like, okay, well, my best is going to be better than if I was sick, but like the goal is still the same. The goal is still to perform at my highest level. And I think oftentimes the goals become a detriment because the goals become what we're striving for. Well, as I outlined a couple of moments ago, life, in particularly sports, is all about random events and setbacks. And so if your whole goal is to be undefeated and win the national championship, what happens when you lose the 6th week of the season? And now you're 5-1. And now instead of being in the top 10 in the college football rankings, now you're number 24. Like, honestly, in the realm of college football, like, it's almost near impossible to win a national championship now. Okay. So, like, do we pack it in? Do we cancel the rest of UCLA's football season because of that? Like, that's what happens when you attach these number goals or these results to these goals, as opposed to maybe process driven approaches.
Process driven. Totally. Well, I've been fascinated about the subject because, as I mentioned, as a Buckeye fan, and as a coach and as life coach and student of coaching, I've always wondered what sets apart the championship level sustainable, because I'm very passionate about sustainability. What is sustainable? And to me, something that is sustainable must be like, if you have too much tension, right? A lot of resistance and tension, it's not sustainable, right? But if you can reduce tension, most people think you can't be intense without tension, but you can. Actually, that's the only way to be sustainably intense, is to reduce the tension. So in order to do that, it's like you just be, and you show up for the process, and you be right here and be totally involved. And we had a coach, I'm sure you're aware of, at Ohio State. We had a coach, Urban Meyer. So Urban Meyer coached at the University of Florida, coached at Ohio State, and was championship level coach, obviously won national championship. But I was always intrigued because if you study his career, there's he kind of takes a team that are on the, kind of struggling a little bit, just not too far away from the top, but just struggling a little bit, can really propel the team quickly to an apex, but it's not sustainable. And as soon as that happens, boop, you're underway down. And I wondered, why is that? But then you look at it, and again, there's not criticism. I don't know the man personally. I just know there's a philosophy here. And he talked about this. He said one day when he first got the Ohio State job, he kind of evaluated the program, and then he got a chance to look in at the national championship game. I think that year, that's like his first year as an Ohio State coach. He got a chance to be an analyst because I think in the college football playoff, it was at the BCS game. I can't remember which one it was, but there was Alabama and somebody else was playing for the national championship, and he kind of just evaluated their program, and he came back to Ohio State and he said, "Hey, we're not there." He's like, "We're not where they are." He's like, so the next year, I think it was 2014. He labeled it the chase. He said, we're chasing, which is all about future. We're chasing this goal of winning a national championship. And they won it that year. But then after that, it was the next year they had a better team, quote unquote, better team, more talent, didn't win it. And then that was it. And then it was just downhill. And then a few years later, obviously he's out the door. So it's like, okay, it wasn't sustainable, but you look at a coach, you take a program like Clemson or, Alabama or something. And I remember watching a game one time, it was like 50-7 or something. It wasn't even close. Alabama was obviously winning. They're playing and the center, so Alabama was on offense. The center fumbled the exchange with the quarterback. I mean, they were up by, and I don't even think it was starters. I think they had like backups in, like second, third string, whatever. The center fumbled the exchange to the quarterback. And then the center and the quarterback got into a little fight right there on the field. And they were arguing and so the reporter came to Nick Saban after the game and said, "What's going on in your team? Like, are you concerned that your center and quarterback had a public altercation there because they fumbled the snap?" And he goes, "Oh, I love it." They're like, "Why do you love it?" And he said, they're like, "You're up 50-7. Like, it wasn't even a game. The game wasn't on the line." He goes, No, we don't care about the score. And he said exactly what you said. He's like, "It doesn't matter." He said, it's not even about who we're competing against. He's like, they're so dialed into the process that it's about how you do everything, how you move the ball, how you snap the ball, and I just thought it spoke volumes that this is why the championships are sustainable. It's not just because of talent. Yeah, it's because of the process. And isn't that true in life?
So much so. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because that is the common theme when you're talking about the truly great teams, is they have a culture of excellence or striving to be excellent, right? Like, I've been on plenty of teams, and you just mentioned it a moment ago, like, you can get talent and win games.
Sure.
Like, that's possible. Like you can be talented and have like a modicum of success. But if you're talking about being an all-time great team, if you're talking about sustaining success over a long period of time, it is not about what you do in this moment in terms of your results. It is what you do in this moment in terms of your process. So like a lot of coaches I've coached with, like have been under and worked with, they would have had that exact same experience and they'd been like, whatever, we're getting out of here with the win. We'll fix that next week. Those guys are freshmen. But like the truly great coaches, the great programs don't operate like that. Like the standard, and it doesn't matter who's here. It doesn't matter who's on the field. The standard is the standard. Mike Tomlin, head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, says that all the time. A couple of years ago, they lost their Hall of Fame quarterback early in the season to injury. They had just traded away the best receiver in the NFL and the best running back in the NFL. And they were playing with a fourth string quarterback. And I don't know if you're aware of this, and for all the football fans or anybody that's not a football fan, I apologize. But Mike Tomlin is one of 2 NFL head coaches in the history of the NFL to never have a losing season, which is an incredible stat. And especially because Mike Tomlin's been a head coach for 20 years. But the reason why that's amazing is because in that year, 2019, they had every reason to kind of like tank the season, get a high draft pick, reload. But during that season, they were asking him about like certain things and, you know, guys having success and how they were able to keep winning. And he kept saying the standard is the standard. Like the standard in Pittsburgh is winning. And like, we're not going to accommodate our standard because our talent is less, which a lot of teams would, right? They would have like packed it in. They would have like prepared for next year. But they don't do that at the best programs. At the best programs, like the standard is the standard. And to like your point, I can remember growing up watching the Cowboys and Jimmy Johnson was the head coach. And he was notorious. Like, you know, back then there wasn't as much parity in the league. And so the Cowboys would dominate a lot of the teams and they'd be up 40, 50 to 7, like you mentioned. And it'd be the end of the game. The backups would be in and there would be an interception or there'd be a fumble. And I can remember still to this day, even when I was, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old, like guys running off the field and Jimmy Johnson, like throwing an absolute temper tantrum with 3 minutes left in a game that like this fumble doesn't matter. But like the point is like the score doesn't matter. Like the score doesn't matter. The standard is still the standard. And these high standards are what you see in the truly elite, the truly great teams. And I tell people that I work with all the time or the corporate companies I work with, like you're either just getting by or you're dominating. And if you want to just get by or you're just interested in wins, then I'm probably not the right person to speak to your group or to coach you because like everything that I do is about being truly great, being excellent, dominating in this moment, regardless of the circumstances. And so I just believe firmly in the process-driven approach, and I've seen it time and time again, not only in my own career, but I've also seen it in the absolute greats to which you're mentioning right now.
Amazing. So good. So good. So this took you, through high school up to the college coaching. You coached at UCLA, is it correct? Right.
That is correct.
Yeah. What was your coaching position there?
I worked with the quarterback. So I was a quarterbacks coach when I was at UCLA.
Fantastic. Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. A really cool time to be there too. This was 2014 and 2015. And in college football, got the chance to work with 2 of the best college football quarterbacks of the last 20 years. Brett Hundley was the starter in 2014. And Josh Rosen was the starter as a freshman in 2015. And these were 2 extraordinarily talented quarterbacks. So it was really cool to work with them every day. And that was a great time to be involved with that program. UCLA was having a lot of success. And kind of like to what we just mentioned, like, a lot of great lessons came from that time. I mean, specifically in 2014, we were one of the picks in the preseason to go to the college football playoff. And it was the first year of the college football playoff. And Brett Hundley was one of the top quarterbacks in the country, and we were kind of the dark horse pick to be one of the teams at the end. And kind of like I was sharing earlier, like we spent all preseason talking about winning the national championship. We spent all preseason talking about it. And so when we lost, we start the season off, we win our first 4 or 5 games. We're in the top 10 nationally, I think maybe even like top 5. And we played a game and we lost. Well, when you spend all preseason talking about the national championship and winning the national championship, when you lose, it has a devastating effect on everybody, because now we're looking around and we're like, we just spent the last 6 months talking about winning the national championship, and us losing to Arizona State today pretty much destroys that opportunity, right? Or Utah or whoever we lost. I don't even remember.
Sure.
But, that's why I'm so firmly in the belief that you need to be process driven. Like, oh, we lost. Okay. Like, stuff happens. Like, that is the reality of life. That is the reality of playing sports at the highest level. How are we going to respond is more important. Sure. And it was interesting because I was doing my master's thesis on kind of the eventual topic I wrote my book on, which was talent acquisition in college football. And I specifically interviewed a couple of people that had worked with the New England Patriots, and obviously with Bill Belichick, who is, I was talking a moment ago about the truly great coaches. And he's definitely one of the coaches that has built a culture and built a team, based on a standard of excellence. And I remember one of the coaches that was working with Belichick early on during the first 3 Super Bowls they won in New England. And I remember distinctly, he was like, when we were in New England, we had a true approach, like a true focus on the next game. It was the only thing we ever talked about. All off season, all preseason, all training camp. The only thing we talked about was beating the Tennessee Titans in week 1 of the preseason.
That's it. That's the whole season.
That's it.
Right there.
We never talked about winning the AFC East. We never talked about being AFC champions. We never talked about competing for the Super Bowl. It is a true focus on the next game. And that is what you see time and time again, is like this focus on what is next. And again, like that UCLA team that I'm talking about in 2014, we finished, I think, 11-3. We finished in the top 10 for the first time in like 25 years for UCLA. It was the highest final season ranking for UCLA since, I think, Deshaun Foster and Cade McNown played for the team.
Sure.
Right. But like that team did not reach its potential. That team could have easily been in the playoff. That team, and so that's not an indictment on anybody or any coaches or any players on that team. Sure. That's just the reality of the situation. And I look at it as a coach, and I look back and I'm like, man, we spent the whole preseason putting pictures of trophies up on the wall, and it gives, sorry, the last point I'll make is like, it gives especially young people, like a false sense of like, oh, we're here to win the championship. And like the 20-year-olds, the 18-year-olds in the locker room, they don't understand. Yeah. And so like, if you're talking about the trophy and putting pictures of the trophy up on the wall, like it gives them a false sense of security. And I think goals sometimes give that false sense of security. And that's why the process driven approach wins time and time again.
So good. And because you're talking about the future, but that is the human dilemma here, is that because we have not learned how to make this moment to be everything that it is, then the mind automatically says, well, we want to get ahead. We want to get to the weekend. We want to get to the vacation. We want to get to retirement. We want to get to something in the future, championship, right? End of the season, whatever. But it's like, none of that is guaranteed. But what is guaranteed is this. And I love it. It's like, I'm a broken record when it comes to this. It's like, this is the championship. This is. And that's what I'm hearing you say. So when you talk about, so Bill Belichick and the Patriots talking about the next game, really what he's saying is like, this is what we have in front of us, is this game coming up. It's not the Super Bowl. It's not the AFC Championship. It's this game. And if you treat it as the Super Bowl, this game, like, and it's like that. And people think it's hard to do this. It's like, it's actually not that hard. It's actually much easier to be here now, because it's like, where else can you be? It's much more difficult to try to live in the future. and then to resist this moment. And that's what we're talking about here.
Totally. And I think also the resistance that you get from like not having goals, right?
Right.
Like, you know, a lot of coaches would say, well, I want my guys like striving towards something. And it's like, that's fine. But like the reality is when you reverse engineer like what it takes to win a Super Bowl, for example, like you're going to have to like prepare backups. You're going to have to like prepare coaches to do, to like overcome adversity. You're going to have to like prepare your team to like not look ahead. So like, how do you do that? Like you have them focus on this moment and like you hold them to high standards in this moment. You don't just like say, well, we lost a preseason game, but like the preseason games don't matter. Like, no, that does matter. And I think a lot of times, like pushback that you can get is you can say, well, like, what are you going to try and do like this quarter? Like, what are your goals for this quarter? And like, you know, listen, the realities are probably that if you go into your boss and you say, oh, well, you know, I want to be laying on the field after the quarter is done and like knowing I gave my greatest effort, they're going to say like, okay, yeah, that's great. You know, write that in your journal, but what are you telling me? And so like combating that, and a lot of this goes back to reverse engineering what it takes to be successful, right? Like you just mentioned, like, okay, well, how are you going to win the conference title? How are you going to win the Super Bowl? Well, you can't win the Super Bowl until you like take care of your conference or get into the playoffs. And you can't get into the playoffs until you win more than half of your games. And like, guess what? You can't win more than half of your games if you're sitting there trying to plot out the rest of your season and trying to keep everybody not playing at the end of games because you're trying to keep them healthy. Like, this undying focus, this relentless focus on what is happening right here, right now is what it takes to be successful. That can be tough, especially in a results oriented society that we live in now, right? Like everything is about the Instagram pic at the end of the game. Like it's not about giving your all. That's great for looking good. But again, if you want to truly be great and truly experience that significance within a team or within your work, I think that's kind of the approach that you have to take. 100%. So sorry, I know I keep coming right back to the same point, but I think that is kind of one of the challenges.
It's everything, and it's a beautiful point, and I don't think we can really emphasize it enough because I always say and I'm sure you got this as a coach, the season's short and we think it's long. It goes by quickly, and
so fast.
And as far as the NFL goes, people say it stands for not for long, right? So your football career, it's not for long. It goes by quick. And I always say this with life, like there's a lot of things we don't know. There's a lot of things that can happen in life. We don't control the weather. We don't control the political situation. We don't control, there's so many unknowns, but one of the things we all know with 100% certainty is that death is coming for everybody, that life has an expiration date, at least, in the body here in this form. So we know that it's actually a gift. I do a little 6-week program for folks, and it's a group workshop. And I had this thought. I was like, what if it was a 600-week program? That's what would be great. What if it was a 600-week program? It would be easy to pack it in and be like, I'll take a week off, or, it won't show up. But because it's 6 weeks and people have paid money for the program, we have 6 live Zoom calls. It's like you miss a Zoom call, you miss a good chunk of the whole program. So it's like, because there's some finality to it. It's like, no, I want to be here. I want to maximize this. And isn't that life though? Like it's not we think it's, when you're young, especially, I'm invincible. It goes on forever. It's like, no, this actually, everything is ending soon. And I don't mean that to say it in like a morbid, fearful way, but it's to realize this moment is a gift because it's not forever. And I think it's such an important point to say, that's why you want to be here now, because why would you waste this? You only get this once in this sense,
It's a great perspective without question. And I think, kind of hammers home the point that we're talking about, where there's significance in every moment. And to your point, you mentioned the fumbled snap when you're up 50, and is Nick Saban going to rip your butt Like when you step off that field and onto the sideline, like guaranteed 100%, he's going to rip your butt. Now, why is he doing that? Like, it doesn't matter. We've already won this game, because there's significance in that moment. There's significance in letting you know that the standards are high, regardless of what the score is. The score does not matter in this program. What matters is you trying to be your absolute best and being excellent every day. And I'm going to hold you to those high standards, regardless of the situation. And there's significance in that moment. There are no throwaway moments. When we're 4 weeks away from the season and it's hot and we're doing training camp at San Bernardino and we don't feel like finishing practice, like there's reason why we're going to line you all up at the end of practice and run you. Like there's a significance to putting you through that hardship, that adversity. And I think sometimes having the perspective, what you just shared, is beneficial in understanding that, like, if we want to achieve the things that we all want to achieve, the results, like we have to go through these moments and give these moments significance. So I think that was really well said, what you just illustrated.
Thank you so much. Likewise. Yeah. So you go from UCLA coaching quarterbacks, right? And then eventually, was your next stop? I think was it the Miami Dolphins? Is that right?
So yeah, I apologize. I'm kind of like jumping around here and jumping into more philosophical stuff. So my path was 4th grade football to Fairview High School in Boulder. I graduated from college and ended up getting my first college job at SMU. So I was 22, 23 years old. I'm from Dallas. The Mustangs, exactly. So I'm from Dallas, Southern Methodist University, which I'll be quite honest with you, I didn't even know was a Division I football team growing up, even though I grew up 5 minutes from the stadium, because SMU had been mired in this basically college football purgatory. They're the only college football program to be handed down the NCAA death penalty, which basically decimated their program. And not only for like the short term in the mid 80s, but like it had lasting effects through the 90s, through the 2000s. As I mentioned, I grew up in Dallas. I didn't even know SMU was a Division I team. But in 2006, after, as I mentioned, 4th grade football, JV high school in Boulder, I got an opportunity to go to SMU. I started there as an ops assistant, which basically meant I was passing out Chick-fil-A's and monitoring study hall, all of the glamorous things you would imagine when you have a dream of being a college football coach. But like I've kind of illustrated before, like my focus was on being the best Chick-fil-A passer outer in the country. And like, can you do the job that you get next year? If you don't do that, well, you might get the job, but like there's also value in you trying to be as great as you can in that moment, because it increases your capacity circle, right? 100%. Or your competence circle. So it's like, if you're just getting by, as I mentioned earlier, like you might, do some good things, you might pick up some things, and then you get the next role. But like in that next role, you're going to have to be better than what you were in this previous role. So like I was trying to be a great Chick-fil-A passer outer so that I would be handed the next responsibility. And then when I was handed that responsibility, I was putting everything I had into that responsibility so that whatever they handed me next, I knew I was going to take care of. So
I progressed. Chick-fil-A. I love it.
Passing out Chick-fil-A.
So good. Everything. It's the best, the highest job in the world. In that moment, I'm passing out Chick-fil-A. That's what I'm doing.
Yes.
So good.
And so, I'm kind of trying to be funny, but I'm also being dead serious. Like that was the role. That was probably the most important thing I did in 2006. But like, again, if I had just been showing up and getting by, passing out Chick-fil-A, why pass me off? Like, why give me the promotion the next year? Why move me up to a grad assistant role? But like, if you're literally treating like passing out to Chick-fil-A and making copies and doing study hall monitoring as a 22-year-old is the most important thing that you do, like certain people are going to see that. Now, there's certain people that will look at it and I've experienced this in my career and I experienced it at SMU. Like, yeah, we're not promoting you to that role, Evan, because you're not a former player, because we don't think you know the game well enough to be in this role. And, this is where I kind of like slowly transition into like what my book is about, where it's like, what truly dictates success at the highest levels, right? Like, is it knowledge of the game? Is it like being a former college football player? Or is it having like such an intense passion for what you are doing and what you want to become, that regardless of your role, everybody can sense your intensity and your intention to dominate? Now, like, again, I've worked with coaches that are like, yeah, Evan, like, you can't do this because you weren't a former player, or I don't know your dad, or like, you don't know anything about football. And it's like, yeah, you know what? Every role I've ever had in football, I was not prepared for. Like, and I would say that a lot of people in life, it's like this. But what ends up happening is like, I cared so much. I had such a passion for being great and in achieving the North Star that I had laid out for myself, that like, oh, you're handing me plays to draw up on a software program that I don't know how to use. Yeah. Yep. Coach Vin Clark, I know exactly how to use that program. Just give it to me. Thank you. And then I go off in the other room and lock myself in a room and learn that computer program. Amazing. Well, I didn't learn the computer program because I was the smartest computer guy on that coaching staff. I learned that computer program because like I cared. I was very passionate about, like, in the grand scheme of things, it was nothing. Because it matters. It matters. Right. And to like tie all this together, you know, this program I'm talking about is Playmaker Pro. It's basically like Microsoft Paint for football coaches.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So it's like, it's a very rudimentary program, but it has arrows, it has blocking schemes, whatever. Coach V comes to me in 2006. He goes, hey, where is Chris? The guy who had the role ahead of me, right? Oh, I don't know where Chris is. Oh man, I need these plays drawn up. Evan, do you know how to use Playmaker Pro? Oh, yep, Coach V, sure do. I had no idea how to use Playmaker Pro. I never used it before in my life. I just seen other guys using it. He goes, hey, I need these drawn up by this afternoon at 4. Can you do that?
I'll get it done.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'll get it done. Now, was it the greatest Playmaker Pro job ever by that 4 o'clock meeting? No. Was it the best that I could do in that moment? Hell yeah. But what's interesting is like, that was one moment. Okay, so now the next time Coach V can't find Chris, he doesn't have to worry, because now he can come to me. And guess what? Now my Playmaker Pro job of drawing up those plays is just a little better. And it just keeps getting a little better, a little better, a little better. So 2006, 2007, I'm a video grad assistant, still assisting with the coaching
SMU.
staff.
Is it correct?
At SMU, 2008, 2009, I'm at SMU, and now I'm on the field and obviously learning this program a little more. And now I'm like intricately involved in like the strategy and like creating these documents for the coaching staff. Fast forward to getting on with the Miami Dolphins, and we can get into that story in a second, because it is kind of an interesting path I took to get into the NFL. But once I got in that building, I did not have the role I wanted. I was working in the video office, and
this is where at SM.
Sorry, this is it for the Miami Dolphins.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I'm working in the video office. Obviously, I don't want to work in the video office. I want to work with the coaches. And I had been asking the coaches while I was at Miami, like, what can I help you with? What can I help you with? It wasn't until like me being there 4 or 5 months, the first week of the first preseason game, that the special teams coach that I kept asking came to me and was like, okay, you want to help me? Watch all of Tampa Bay's punt rushes from last year and draw them up for me. That will help me. So he said that to me at like 2 o'clock one afternoon. I went downstairs, I locked myself in a room, and I watched every single play from Tampa Bay's previous season. Okay, so this is like 160 plays. I drew all of them up on Playmaker Pro. And like, the reason I say this is like, everything I had done the previous 4 years went into that like one moment. Like, here's the moment. I've been spending 5 months asking every coach in that building if I can help them. Nobody will give me anything. And then all of a sudden, the special teams coordinator says, yeah, you want to help me draw up these plays? Well,
unbelievable.
4 years before, when Coach V asked who could do this and like, do you know this? And I just said, yes. It's because
one
like,
random day, I need this by 4 o'clock. You didn't know how to do it. You said yes. You showed up. That led to the NFL.
that led to this moment in the NFL. I wasn't even doing what I wanted to do in the NFL. I was doing video stuff. I was just getting my foot in the door. And I was going to do the same thing I did at SMU that I did, or the same thing in Miami that I did at SMU. And he asked me, you know, hey, draw all these plays up. He didn't say when to give it to him. He didn't say how to he just said, draw these plays up.
Draw them up.
Stayed there all day. So he said that to me at like 2:00. I went into a room. I stayed there till 11:30 at night.
Unreal.
Drew up every play from that season. Right now, by this time, I'm an expert at Playmaker Pro. Like, there's nobody in America that can do what he just asked me to do better than I can. Now, nobody in that building knows it, but he asked me to do that. I stay up there all night. It's 11:30 at night. I print it all out. I print out all my like drawings, whatever, you know, it's like this, whatever, 20-page packet. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to leave it on his chair. So when he gets here in the morning, he sees it. So I walk upstairs. And by the way, there's no coaches in the building. It is like dead silent. All the offices are empty, but the special teams coordinator's door is like cracked open. So I kind of like knock on the door. He's in there with the special teams assistant. They're like, you know, it's the end of the day. They're drinking a beer or whatever. And I was like, oh, hey, sorry, Coach Bono, just didn't mean to bother you. I just wanted to give this to you. He's looking at me like all funny, like, what are you still doing here? What are you giving me? Hand it to him. He starts flipping through this. He's like, what is this? I was like, oh, those are the punt rushes you asked for. He's like, you mean from today? Yeah, coach. Like, I just spent the last 11 hours not doing anything but drawing these plays up. And he was like, oh, okay. It was like almost in that moment, he was like, oh, I can give you stuff to do. Like, you can help me. So he's like, oh, wow, this is great. This is great. And I'll never forget, he turned around and he started like writing a list on the whiteboard behind him. He goes, I'm going to start building a list for you here of like things for you to do. Amazing. And so like, you know, and then he was like, hey, sit down, have a beer. So it was like this very cool moment where I'd like stayed there all night to like finish this project. I was just going to leave it on his desk. He invites me in. He kind of like looks it over. He gives me the thumbs up. He, you know, tells me to grab a beer. So it was like a very like cool moment, but I'll never forget. Like, I left the building and I called my parents like at home, just like in my excitement to be like, oh my God, listen to what just happened. Partially because that was like a really tough period of time, being in a role that you are sure that you're like vastly overqualified for and you want to be doing other things. But again, like in that moment when he asks, hey, can you draw up all of Tampa Bay's punt rushers from last year? If you don't take every moment leading up to that to dominate and be your absolute best, like you're not going to compete at the highest level. You're not going to be cut out for what he just asked for in that moment when you're sitting in an NFL facility. And so I just fully believe in like this undying focus on being the best you absolutely can, because yes, maybe it doesn't matter in this moment towards this one game, but like, what are you there for? And a lot of times you are there building your, you know, again, your capacity, your competency, to like continue to increase that, so that in those moments, not only are you ready to step up to those moments, but you're ready to dominate in those moments.
Absolutely stunning. Love it. Just beautiful, beautiful life lessons. You can't get better than that. So good.
Sorry for the long-winded story, but I think it applies a lot to what we're talking about and kind of like, you know, how everything, it tends to tie together.
Absolutely. Because, you know, so many people who haven't been trained to approach this moment with utmost presence and appreciation and intensity would have chalked that up. Oh yeah. I wanted to be an NFL coach, but now I'm working in the video office. But literally that was your door in. This is literally how you went. I mean, what you're describing is it's how you go from the fourth grade to the NFL in 6 years.
Yes.
Having these incredible experiences, coaching quarterbacks at UCLA. So did that come later or after the NFL, or did that come, when did you spend time at UCLA as a quarterbacks coach?
Yeah. After Miami, I went to a school in West Texas called McMurray University. And after a few years there, I ended up at UCLA. in 2014, 2015. And after the 2015 season, or I guess the last few weeks of the 2015 season, I kind of had a moment where I was starting to question my North Star. And, as much as we were talking about it earlier and how it can really drive you through all types of adversity and setbacks and continue to allow you to get back up, the moment you lose that North Star, all of those things become very difficult. So I think like in a very brief moment, I kind of realized that like, I don't think the North Star that I've been chasing the last 12 years has the same significance to me now. And kind of led to me leaving coaching in early 2016.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about that because you made the decision to leave, obviously, the football coaching, your career there. And now you are coaching for life, like just in everything. So what made you, what was that shift? Like, why did that North Star kind of diminish its, or why did you change trajectory, I should say?
Well, a couple of things for the audience that's not familiar. When you're talking about being a high level coach in college athletics or professional athletics, you're talking about a very unstable lifestyle. You're talking about, as I just outlined for you my 12-year career, coaching in Boulder, Dallas, Miami, Abilene, Texas, and LA. And I was fortunate to stay at a couple of places for more than a few years. But like, as I was looking around more and more of the rooms that I was in and the people I was surrounded by, I started to see some things that I wasn't really that excited about that you probably don't really realize when you're in your early 20s, right? Sure. Like looking at people and, coaches have these very difficult lifestyles, not only having to move all the time, but like it's a very intense daily commitment. Sometimes I told everybody when they asked about when I was in Miami, they're like, "Oh, are you hanging out with LeBron on South Beach?" And I was like, "I eat every meal at the Miami Dolphins facility. So no, I don't hang out on South Beach with LeBron." Like these are 10, 12-hour days on the low end. And like, as I said, like being in the office at 11:30 midnight is not uncommon, especially in the early parts of the week during the season. So you start looking around and it's like some coaches have like really weird relationships with their kids. A lot of them are divorced. A lot of them kind of like have maybe these perspectives on coaching, 30 years in where it's like, man, like, why did I do this? And not that they were influencing me directly, but I think indirectly you start to see a lot of these things. And it's kind of like you have this moment where you're like, okay, what am I doing this for? And again, early on, I wanted to be the head coach at the University of Colorado or the Dallas Cowboys. And I think what happened was that stopped really playing as big a role in what I wanted to do, as I moved through my coaching career. And I didn't notice it it came to a head in just one moment. So I'm a meticulous note taker. I've taken notes in literally every meeting I've had throughout my entire career. So I have like binders full of notes about recruiting and about these seasons and about all these things. I've always been that person that has my notebook ready to take notes 5 minutes before the meeting starts. Like that is me. And it was probably like 2 or 3 weeks to the end of the season in 2015. We were all filing in to the main meeting room, for another day. This is at UCLA. Mm-hmm. Everybody's piling into this room. And I don't know, Jamal, I cannot describe to you what happened, but it was kind of like in the movies where like, from outer space, like this just moment like hits you in the head. And I just like had this feeling like, I don't want to go into this room. I don't want to go into this meeting room and like take notes. And so I retreated into like one of the smaller conference rooms that were there just to like have a moment with myself, and like that feeling intensified. And I've gone through adversity in my coaching career. I was mentioning being in Miami and not having the role that I wanted. And like, that's adversity. And like, that's tough. Living in West Texas, when you are used to living in a city like Dallas or Boulder or Miami, is tough. But like, I would always come back to this idea that like, okay, I'm building the foundation for the greatness that lays before me. Okay. Like this is going to be a chapter in my and I could reframe a lot of what was happening. And like, I'm going to become stronger and better through this quote unquote adversity, this challenge. And I think like in that moment, that feeling just grew and grew and grew. And that was the first time that like my North Star did not take me out of that moment. So usually I was able to kind of say, okay, well, like this moment is a learning. Like, what am I going to take from this moment? This is going to lead to this. And this was the first time that having a very intense feeling of like, I don't know if this is what I want to do. And like that North Star did not save me from that moment. And so it was a very weird feeling because I never experienced it before. But I wanted to be true to like myself. As I mentioned, you know, like I've done a lot of personal development work, a lot of spiritual development. I read a lot of different things other than just coaching books. And so it was almost like I was having this moment, and it's like, you can do one of two things. You can just like completely ignore it and say, well, I'm 12 years in. I've had all these experiences. My career is literally, I've done all the hard work. My career is literally laid out in front of me. Or do you like lean into that feeling and say, you know what? Like, I've never felt like this. This is, something's wrong. Something is wrong. I live in Santa Monica. I work at UCLA, one of the best institutions in the country. I work for a really good football program. I work with some of the best players at my position in the last 20 years of college football history. What is wrong? Why am I not fulfilled? Why am like, if I'm not happy now, when do I become happy? And again, you know, obviously looking at the people around you and seeing them being unhappy in their personal lives kind of makes you also reflect as well, where it's like, you know, is it them, or is this a business that creates this unfulfillment or this unhappiness, so to speak? So anyway, it was just kind of like being true to like what I thought was important and what I wanted. And a lot of the things I wanted when I was 23, 24 stopped being important to me, you know, at 33, 34.
Totally. So good. So, and thank you for sharing. And I think so, I would imagine that in the athletic coaching world, because there is a culture of chasing something, chasing championships, chasing the promotion, chasing whatever. My philosophy is whatever you chase, I always say you never have what you chase because it's always tomorrow. Right. But it really is, I think it's a process of learning how to come home, right, to this moment, and to come home and to say, this is where I am and this is where I live, and I'm welcomed here in this moment. Success is this. It's literally this. And when we do come home to this moment, and we say, if there's a discomfort, if there's something going on here going, yeah, so it's not about the chase, right? It's not about it's really not. So I imagine what that opened up for you is a new vision, right? A new possibility of what life could be. Because literally all your incredible experiences in your life leading up to that moment is prepared you for this.
Yeah, 100%. And I would also say, you know, I tell people I'm still doing the same work. It's just on it's the same principles. It's just a different highway. So even though I'm not coaching on the field, I'm still coaching. I'm still developing people. I'm still trying to teach lessons through football, right? Because as you can tell, I tell a ton of sports stories in my coaching and in my speaking. But again, these are great conduits to like pass on these lessons and to illustrate these lessons and make them relatable. And that's something I really enjoy. And I think maybe even going back further to like the very early stages of like my development as a leader in athletics, like I've always equated leadership to, you know, team building and leadership in athletics. And like, this is just maybe in a way, realizing the destiny that I've always had, which I know sounds kind of like weird, but like, kind of like reflecting back, and it's like, what am I best built to do? And, you know, I mentioned kind of like the uniqueness of my path in coaching, and the reality of succeeding specifically in coaching is like, it's all about who you know. And like, if you worked with Sean McVay and you got his coffee every single day 4 years ago, you're probably a head coach in the NFL right now.
Isn't that
like,
crazy?
Yeah, right. But it's like, you don't have to be the most qualified, but like your association with certain coaches qualifies you for certain jobs. And like, I'm only pointing this out. I had great experiences in my career, but none of the guys that I worked on, you need guys that you work with to go off and get their own jobs so that they can hire you for like the next role in your evolution as a coach. And like, if you're working for teams where everybody is complacent and not going anywhere or not having opportunities to go other places, it's very hard for the younger coaches to like catapult up that ladder. And I think like to a certain extent, I was kind of looking at it and I remember thinking like, okay, it's been 12 years to get to this point in my career. Realistically, if everything goes absolutely awesome for me, when am I going to be the head coach at the University of Colorado? Like in 12 more years. So I've got to do what I just did again. Like, I don't think I want to do that. And like, honestly, I love telling stories. I love being involved in developing people. And I felt like I could do a lot more good and a lot more impact off of the field than I was on the field. So it was kind of a combination of multiple things that were happening. And, as you mentioned, kind of led me to this life coaching, executive coaching, and the speaking that I do now.
Amazing. I love what you're saying. I think like if we drop the agenda sometimes, that's kind of my philosophy here, is we drop the agenda, life will take you where life wants to take you and you just show up for it. And there was a coach at Ohio State, one of our legendary coaches, Jim Tressel. I'm sure you've heard of him. And Jim,
of course.
Jim Tressel, he was had an incident led to his dismissal. He, left not on his own accord, and everybody, he was a pariah at the time in the media and all this guy. I mean, he was one of the, he's just one of the great ones, but he just, they trashed him and, he's gone and unceremoniously fired. And, he's, and he had a mentor that looked at him and said, I know you. And which is so beautiful to be known, to be seen and known. He's like, I know you. And he's like, and I know that the season you're coming up on is going to be your greatest season. It's going to be your best season. And Jim talks about that. He says, I didn't believe him when he said it, but I was open to it. And he said, because I was down, this was like, where do you go from here? Ohio State, the top programs in the country, head coach. Yep. I mean, where do you go? It's only down from here.
Yep.
And now he is the president of Youngstown State University. He's a college president.
Yeah.
And he said, by being open to that, like, this is I'm moving into my greatest season ever, because all the things, like you were saying, prepared him for this moment. He's like, he goes, I was coaching 80 to 100 young men on the football team. He's like, now I'm coaching 30,000.
Yeah.
I mean, and it reminds me of your story, it reminds me of like what you're talking about. It's like, you go from like, now you have life. Now you have access to just about everything.
Yeah.
So
100%
in the coaching world, so it's like, instead of coaching this team or this team, now you coach literally where life takes you, and there's no limits to that. And that's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. So I want to wrap. I could talk to you all day. I really appreciate so much of your insights here, but I would like to wrap up with this question if we could. Okay. And it would be, you've worked for a lot of great coaches and been around a lot of great people. Who's been the number one influence? If you had to, maybe that's a hard question, but who's been a top, let's say you don't have to rank them, but like, who's been a major influence for you that really helped you be this kind of person that just shows up and what is the thing they taught you? Maybe like what's been the coach that's impacted you the most, or the leader that's impacted you the most, and what's that takeaway that they gave to you?
Wonderful question. And I have a couple of people that come to mind. First of all, in terms of my own development, I have to acknowledge my parents, who were tremendous influences on me in an incredibly positive way. And I think specifically, not only giving me kind of like the own belief building me up as a young child and giving me confidence that I could accomplish whatever I put my mind to, but also holding me and my siblings to very high standards. Work has always been at a premium in our household, right? Like work comes first, and the commitment to the team and the commitment that you make to the work has always been at the core of like my childhood and like the lessons that were taught. So I always tell people I learned everything I know about coaching from my parents, and my parents know nothing about coaching. And I think that Beautiful. They just did a tremendous job of kind of like giving me and my siblings the foundation for the people that we've become. And again, a lot of that goes back to like the work and like showing up every day, regardless of the circumstances. The other person I think of is my grandfather, who also was a person who had a tireless work ethic. I mean, I can remember going over to his house, at all times during my childhood, and like on the weekends, like he's working from whatever 9 to 12 on Saturdays and Sundays, and like it's all his work is all spread out on the breakfast table, and it's like that's what Grandpa does. And in 2006, when I moved back to Dallas from college, I moved in to my grandparents' pool house. Again, like when you're a young college athletic, college coach or just in athletics, you don't make a lot of money. And I was a volunteer ops assistant. So I probably would have had a very difficult time anywhere making it had I not been in Dallas, Texas. And I just happened to get my first role there. Well, I lived in the pool house of my grandparents' house. My grandpa was still going to work every day. So I had to go to work every day at 5 a.m. So I'm walking out the door at 4:45, 5 a.m. and there's Grandpa in the driveway, getting in the car. Hey, Evan, what you got today? Oh, I got practice, and then I have this class I got to do for my master's program tonight, and I got this and this, and we're going to go to Tulsa. We're going to leave on Friday for Tulsa. Okay, great, cool. See ya. It's like he's getting in the car and going to work. And I think that was present throughout my whole childhood. So I think my parents, my grandfather were huge influences on just kind of like this is what it takes to be successful. Like there are no shortcuts. You have to put in the work. And I think when I think of coaches, I think of a couple. Number one, the best coach I've ever been around. I've probably coached with 200 coaches personally. I could sit here and debate number 2 through number 20. Right. Number 1, undisputed, the best coach I ever worked with was Frank Gans Sr. Was just an incredible person.
Frank Gans Sr.?
Frank Gans Sr.
Gans Sr. Okay.
He was a former head coach for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was a special teams coach in the NFL for 30 years. He came out of retirement in 2008 to coach with the SMU Mustangs when June Jones was hired as the head coach there. And he was, without question, the most incredible coach I was ever around. Yes, he was very charismatic. He was a wonderful orator, like unbelievable. Like when he walked in the room and he was speaking, like you felt it. But that's not what made him great. What made him great was who he was as a person, the type of lessons that he was instilling in us. And I'll be quite frank, I use a lot of his lessons every single day in my coaching and in my speaking. Every single day. My greatest piece from my coaching career were the notes I took in every single one of his meetings. They were that powerful and that profound, and a lot of things that had nothing to do with on the field football playing, a lot of things that had to do with, how great military teams overcame adversity and what it takes to turn around a losing program. Frank Gans Sr. was just incredible. And I also was fortunate to have a couple of people that were close to me that just provided me support. I had a mentor, Barry Faulkner, one of the coaches at SMU early on, Coach Ronnie Van Clark. And I could sit here and name, a dozen others, but just a couple of coaches that I didn't know what I was doing early on. And it's amazing how somebody just giving you just letting you know that everything's okay or that you're on the right path, especially when you have no idea what's happening or what's going on, can just provide you with a huge boost of confidence and maybe just a knowledge that everything's okay. I don't need to overanalyze everything that's happening or everything that's not happening. So as you can tell, I've been very blessed throughout my path and my journey to be associated with people that not only were great models of leadership and models for who I wanted to be, but also gave me great lessons and held me to high standards, which is always good and we all need.
That's so amazing. Fantastic. Coach Evan Burk, what a gift this conversation is. I really appreciate what you bring to the table and what you're sharing here, and just your life, and that you're transparent and making your life available to so many others is a true gift. And I appreciate this time, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamal. This was a really fun conversation for me and really enjoyable as well. So thank you so much for having me today. Really enjoyed it.
Of course. And to the listeners here, really, I would suggest, this is a conversation I'm going to be listening to more than once. And I think I would encourage, everybody listening here to just pick it apart, really a lot of meat here, a lot of great things to just digest and to take in. So thank you guys. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.